Welcome back to Team Racing Basics, where we discuss how to do team racing manoeuvres more effectively. For those of you who don't know me, my name is George Potter and I've been team racing for 10 years. In 2022, I came second at the British University's Team Racing Championships and I love team racing. Today we're going to be talking about covering downwind. This is a really important part of racing because downwind is going to be one of the best chances for boats behind to catch up with boats ahead. So it's going to compress the race and allow us to regain winning combinations from losing combinations. Covering is a part of racing which people often get wrong. So firstly, we're going to go over how to get in the best covering position. And once we know how to cover more effectively, we're going to look at how we can use an effective cover to execute a conversion and specifically look at a classic double cover, which is a maneuver which will allow two boats to attack a boat ahead in order to get one of them through by Mark 3 at the bottom of the run on a classic team racing S course. You're going to see this maneuver all the time. It's really helpful for breaking down a 1-2, so it's a really important skill to learn. A cover works in two ways. First of all, a cover works by blocking the opponent's wind. But secondly, a cover works by creating turbulent air off the back of our sails that will travel along an opponent's sail less efficiently, producing less lift and therefore accelerating them less, causing them to travel less quickly through the water. This means that we need to be in a very specific place in order for our cover to work. Now, as we travel onto the run, a lot of people think that they just need to be directly behind a boat in order to cover them. But this kind of speaks to the first fallacy which we need to overcome in order to be able to cover effectively on the run, which is there's not really such a thing as dead downwind ever. Very rarely will a boat ever be travelling directly away from the wind. They'll almost always be on a slight angle, either slightly up or slightly by the lee, and generally they'll be slightly up. And this is going to dictate a lot about where we put our cover, because as they're moving across, laterally across the run, if we're dead upwind of them, they're actually sailing into clean air. They're sailing into this wind that's travelling down here. So if we want to block someone's wind who's at an angle, we need to be really far ahead in order to block that wind. So we'll need to be right over here in order to block that wind. Because here we're going to get that wind travelling off the back of our sail, creating those turbulent effects and blocking the wind they're about to sail into. So to reiterate that, we're not looking to block the wind they're currently in, we're looking to block the wind they're about to sail into. So we always need to be way further ahead than we expect to cover effectively. And you'll notice this when boats come onto the run, often a leading boat who's trying to protect their wind will point nice and high, because if we want to cover a boat who's over here pointing this high, we might need to be all the way forward to here. So we need to quickly sail high as we come around Mark 2, sail high and very early on establish ourselves in a proper covering position. And most covers you'll see at a low level on the team racing circuit won't ever even start to bite. So we need to be way further across than we expect, and that will allow us to fully block an opponent's wind. One way we can do this is by, if they've got a burgee at the top of their mast, we're going to look for where their apparent wind is coming from rather than the true wind direction, and we want to be wherever the apparent wind is pointing plus half a boat length, and that half a boat length is going to mean that our mainsail is doing the covering, because that's where we're going to get our biggest turbulent effects off our biggest sail. And so you can imagine how far forwards that is, and that's a really long way. The downside of this, of course, is that the further forwards we are, the easier it is for our opponent to jibe out. And now they're going to have really clean wind on the new side, and you'll have to work all the way across over here to cover them again. And this is often why covers don't work in a one-on-one situation, because we can never quite get far enough across to cover them, and then when we jibe, be able to cover them again, or do anything with our cover. The second important thing to know about covering is that effective covers are made on the reach. They're made before we even get onto the run, and that's because we want to be as close as possible to the boat ahead of us in order to do an effective cover. There's an interesting rule which you can learn about from engineering, which is that if you halve the distance of your cover is going to be 4 times as effective. So it doesn't just vary that you're twice as close, it's twice as good. If you're twice as close, it's 4 times as good. I can't show you the maths for that, but just trust me on that one. So if we're able to close just half a boat length or a quarter boat length on the reach, that's going to make our cover on the run maybe twice as effective. So we really want to close up as much of a gap as we can and be as close on top of them as possible. And that's going to mean that we have a much more effective cover. And we're going to get, as we said before, right on the wind they're sailing into, as close as we can. And it's at this point that we need to work out what we're actually going to do with it. And this is where having a teammate can be really helpful, because something that's really common that we see with covers is that a cover is effective and then someone has a choice. They have to sail down one side of the boat ahead, and they sail maybe over here to the right, and then as soon as they're not covering, this boat re-accelerates, and then when they both jibe, the boat that's ahead still manages to get to the next mark first and the cover doesn't do anything. Or alternatively, they have a really effective cover, they're sailing very fast, they bear away, and then they sail down this side, and now they're affected by rule 17, they can't luff above their proper course, and again, yellow can just jibe, and as they come back in towards a mark 3, which might be down here, then yellow has the inside line and is still going to round the mark ahead. So when we're covering, we need to get close, we need to be on the wind they're sailing into, and we need to have a plan, which is where we can use the double cover. The double cover is a very specific move for breaking down a 1-2, and here I'm going to show you how we can use the most common form of it. In fact, it isn't only used for breaking down a 1-2, it can be used for breaking down all sorts of combinations where you have 2 boats behind who want to catch a boat ahead. But we most commonly see it when we're trying to break down a 1-2. Now, when we do this, we need our boat in 2 to enter that perfect covering position we were talking about before. This is going to pull them, especially if this boat is trying to sail high to keep clean wind, it's going to pull them very far to this side of the run, and they're going to be doing everything they can to cover. The problem we have here, as we discussed earlier, is that yellow has all of this option to jibe out and get clean wind again. So yellow just needs to sail to the ley line towards the next mark, jibe, and then they're in clean. So what we're going to do to prevent her from doing this is our second boat is going to sail in, and they're going to get close as they can to the boat who's their teammate. They're not going to leave a gap here, and they're going to be watching yellow like a hawk. Now, what's interesting is that this boat probably isn't doing very much covering right now. They're probably not having much of an effect on the race. They're not having much of an effect on how much bad wind yellow gets, even though it might feel like they're directly upwind of them. But they're probably, even there, they're not actually doing very much covering. But they're going to be watching like a hawk, and they want to know, as soon as yellow jibes, that they've jibed half a second earlier, that they're going to be jibing just before. So when they jibe, they're going to jibe just ahead, and yellow is going to jibe right into their cover on the new side. And if you get this perfect, you'll see, as you come out the jibe, you've jibed half a second earlier, and yellow literally decelerates out of their jibe. They're expecting to have this big pump, their sails fill, and they're just hit by this waft from your sails switching sides. It's like they've been punched by a gap in the wind there, and they'll completely stall out. From here, our teammate is also going to jibe at the same time as yellow, or just before, and now this boat, the boat who was behind, the second boat in the double cover, is going to get as close as they can and get right on yellow's face here to cover them as much as possible as they come down towards a final mark. And this boat on this side is going to look to try and get in a place where they can get room. Now, what's really important with this cover is we don't try and get greedy. This is a way to get one person through. When they get room, we're gonna get this boat through, and this boat is probably going to be screwed because they can be luffed really hard by yellow, but we're back in the game here, which can be really important if we're breaking down a 1-2 or attacking forwards. So we've pushed in, we've got room. Again, another way we need to be careful not to get greedy is when we're doing the cover, this boat needs to be careful not to get too far forwards. If yellow's completely stalled out, then we're going to need to hold our position. We're going to need to use lots of rudder to slow ourselves down. We're going to maybe need to ease our sails. We're going to not be sailing the boat in an optimal way, because all our job here is to slow yellow to get our teammate through. We're not worried about our boat speed at all, because we can't get all the way around the front. That's unrealistic. So we need to hold our perfect covering position, and if possible, we want our boat to be within 20 centimeters of an opponent, as close as we dare get, because yellow know as soon as they luff, you're tempting them. If they luff to try and get you off them, then our teammate is definitely through. So we don't even mind if they attack us. So all we're trying to do is get that cover on nice and tight. This boat's holding to the last moment, that's sweeping in and getting room, which is going to allow them to get through and break down a 1-2, maybe steal a first place off somebody, and prevent them from running away with the race. So our key takeaways from this episode about covering and the double cover are, first of all, that we always need to be further forwards than we expect. We need to be covering our opponent's apparent wind, not the true wind, and we need to be half a boat length even further forward than this, so they get the trailing edge effects off our main, off our jib. So we need to be really, really far forwards, always further forwards than we think is going to be right. And as soon as you're in the right place, you'll feel that cover bite. You'll feel the other boat instantly slow down. And this will work from as far away as kind of 4 boat lengths. So we really always need to push further forwards than we expect. Our second rule is the distance squared rule. This idea that if we get twice as close, it's going to make our cover 4 times as effective. So we always need to be sailing the boat as fast as possible, closing as much ground on the reach, and really closing that gap as much as we can to really emphasize the effectiveness of our cover, because the further away we are, the less our cover will work, and that's always what we're trying to do, is just get closer and closer and closer. And in a perfect cover, you'll feel it bite, and that will help you get further forwards, which will help you cover, which will help you get further forwards in this virtuous cycle that means you can eat up an opponent's distance very quickly and overtake them soon. Our final point when we're covering is we always need to bear in mind our objective. What are we trying to do with the cover? For instance, if we're in that double cover situation and we're the boat who's covering on the way back into the mark to help our teammate get room, all we are thinking about is being as close as we can, as covering as tightly as possible, not slipping forwards, controlling our speed. Similarly, if we're covering on our own, if it's a single cover, we're thinking about trying to get to the side of them to get room. We're thinking about trying to get a jibe in and attack them on starboard. We're thinking about how can we actually turn our cover into a position, because we don't just want to gain ground on them, we also want to overtake our opponents. So we always need a plan of how we're actually going to overtake, and not just getting caught on the wrong side, covering well but then getting caught on the wrong side, maybe going too far forwards, moving off our cover because we can't control our speed. We're always working out where do we want to be to take a position. Thanks for watching. I hope that this was helpful for working out where the best place to be for a cover is and how we can do a classic double cover in order to overtake an opponent boat between marks 2 and 3. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Please consider liking, subscribing to the channel if you're enjoying the content I'm making. And I hope this is super helpful in your next team race, and that you're able to execute some really effective covers and move up the results table. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.